Now, you've seen the billboards all over Britain. Vinnie Jones, Ice-T and other assorted hard nuts glowering out over the words Mortal Kombat. It took a while to realise that this wasn't another Schwarzenegger blockbuster, but the latest addition to Britain's fastest-growing entertainment industry, computer games. Based on a popular video arcade game, Mortal Kombat is a martial arts war at your fingertips, technically more sophisticated and graphically more violent than existing games. As most of us over 16s have never actually played a computer game, The Late Show thought it was time to find out what all the fuss is about. So in a moment I'll be talking to the writer Will Self and the product designer Richard Seymour, who've been test driving the game for us. But first, a beginner's guide to Mortal Kombat. It looked like a recruitment campaign for some lunatic band of vigilantes. In fact, the billboards were part of one of the biggest promotional drives the computer games market has ever seen. And it worked. With a UK turnover of £15 million in its first week in the shops, Mortal Kombat was second only to Jurassic Park in the entertainment industry's hit parade of big earners. The principle is simple. Each player is a combatant in a virtual battleground, assuming the persona of a different martial arts expert. By tapping in a special code, an extra gory level of graphics can be accessed. The game is then a matter of bludgeoning your opponent with blows and kicks. The winner eventually earns the honour of tearing out the loser's heart. The makers of Mortal Kombat have sold the game very much on its violence, although at first sight the uninitiated might wonder why. By cinematic standards, the graphics are crude and two-dimensional, but unlike the cinema, this is an interactive medium, and Mortal Kombat tailors itself to the individual player. The better you get at the game, the harder it gets as the computer responds to your moves. It's the most fully interactive game yet. But is it the future? How will this new generation of computer games ultimately affect the way we relate to the world around us? At the end of the day, how will it mess with our heads? Will Self, you're not a regular user of computer games. How did Mortal Kombat mess with your head?
Well, I don't think it messed with it at all, really. I mean, I think it's got very poor levels of what you call suspension of disbelief. You know, it's very hard to think your way into it. I mean, it may provide an adrenaline rush for people who like punching buttons very quickly, but I think it's no more sophisticated than the game of ping pong, it seems to me.
Richard, you are a regular user of computer games. Is this state-of-the-art, and what is different about it from the existing games?
Technically, it's about as good as we've seen so far. The really interesting things about it really aren't to do with what you're seeing on screen at all. It's what's happening in the software programming side that's leading us into new generations of products. And there's the very beginnings of sort of very basic machine intelligence at work in this. These things learn from how you play. They understand, or they work out through some quite complex mathematics in the program, how you are failing, and they then strengthen their resolve and their attack from that point of view. So it's quite sinister development, really.
What about the graphic sophistication? Much has been made about how graphically this is very sophisticated. Will says he didn't find it so. I mean, is this as good as it gets at the moment?
Well, it's funny, really, isn't it? The backgrounds seem pretty cheesy, don't they? They're sort of things we've seen before, but the reason that the backgrounds are so dull is because they need all the power in the rig to drive the characters. The characters are actually taken from real-life filming of real-life figures that then re-digitize these characters to produce these individuals. So they're sort of semi-photo real.
Presumably you've played, although you're not a regular games player, you've played things like Space Invaders. Did the relative sophistication of this, compared to those early games, draw you in more?
Well, I think that's very interesting. I think when Space Invaders came out, it did seem to be a kind of radical departure as far as arcade games were concerned. But what we're talking about now is whether this has any role as a narrative medium comparable to entertainment medium comparable to a film or a novel, you know. And I think it will when we have full motion video, when we have full photorealism throughout the sequence. Then the element of interactivity and machine intelligence that Richard's been talking about will give us a new medium, de facto, a new kind of medium, a new narrative entertainment medium.
What about the violence? I mean, is the violence of Mortal Kombat sort of much more extreme than existing games?
If you make a comparison with other games, then this is a new level of nasty. I mean, ripping someone's head off or pulling their heart out is pretty extreme stuff, isn't it? But you compare it with the Circus Maximus, or you compare it with Reservoir Dogs, And it's pretty, kindergarten stuff, isn't it?
But the difference is that you're actually there doing it.
Yeah,
Or you're not actually there doing it, but you're virtually there doing it.
You say this, it's an interesting point. You've got to ask yourself a simple question. Who's playing who here? Are you pressing the buttons, or is the game pressing your buttons? Really, the programmer is pressing your buttons. He's already proscribed all of the moves here. He's set the thing up. It's he who's playing you, and it's him who's manipulating your movement. So to believe that this is true interactivity, or meta design, where you yourself are controlling the outcome, is a little bit naive, really. You are an innocent in this territory.
Does that excite you as a writer, the possibility of this new interactive medium?
Yeah, I think it'll be a great medium, a very exciting medium to work in, unquestionably. And I think that like any good medium, it will point up extreme moral dilemmas for the artist, because when you get into situations, we've been saying, with photoreal figures who you can decide to do things to, and you have the machine deciding to do things to you in your guise. It's very like Ray Bradbury's idea in Fahrenheit 451 of the continuous soap opera in which you're delivered a part every day, and people on the screen turn to you and say, well, what do you think, Tracy? And you have your line ready. And we're going to be able to do things like that allow people to participate in these experiences. It will enable you to do things that may make narratives more interesting, but I don't think it'll ever rob the desire for the viewer or the reader to actually let go and just simply identify with whoever it is in the awful torture sequence in Reservoir Dogs that they wish to identify with.
But imagine being able to watch that in a video format and get to this awful torture sequence and then press the button because you want more violence. A bit more torture, please. Yeah. We shouldn't really be concerning ourselves too much with what's happening in the world of Sega and Nintendo and the other computer games guys, but what's going on outside. How normality is being manipulated outside. My mum, for instance, believes that when the 9 o'clock news opens, that's a lovely cut crystal orb and there's that nice newsreader. She hasn't the faintest idea, and neither's Will, by the way, until today, that didn't actually exist.
I think that's true. I think there's an enormous amount of ordinary experience in a mass, highly urbanized society that is indistinguishable from kind of virtual scenarios. There's nothing more computer generated than driving along a motorway. It's certainly not real. You're operating in a completely virtual world.
Yeah, a lot of people get the impression that virtuality, call it what you will, this thing, will come across us with a great big bang. It isn't like that. The machine intelligence side, this is just ramping up. These things creep into our lives very subtly. Before
we leave Mortal Kombat, can I ask you both, will you be watching it again? Will, self?
Not until, I can't really identify with Sonya and Kang. When they share more openly and honestly with me about their feelings, then I'll care when they rip each other's heads off. But until then, it won't do a lot for me now.
And Richard?
I don't know. I'll be certainly following very carefully what's going on. When we talk about no emotion, it makes me concerned. I don't know how many parents have watched their kids' thumbs bleed playing these things because they're pressing so hard on it. I don't think they're necessarily associating with the figures because they know they're going to fall down, they're going to get up again. But there's certain aspects of this that trouble me, not because it's a video game, but because I don't yet completely understand what these motivations are, what makes it so attractive to God knows how many people.
OK, well, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much, Richard Seymour and Will Self.